The Right Side with Doug Billings.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, The Right Side with Doug Billings. Okay, my guest today, Emmet Connor, is the author of The Red Pandemic, the Global Marxist Cult. I want to bring him on right away and let him talk to you about this book. Like I said, I was on an X space with him the other day, and just an incredible amount of information about topics I think that you will find very interesting. Emmet, welcome to The Right Side. Reagan, let's bring him on. There he is.
Good afternoon, Doug. How you doing?
I love the accent. My homeland, Ireland. Emmet and I were talking a couple of days ago, and I told him that my ancestry hails from the Emerald Isle and Scotland, England, but primarily Ireland. And it's good to meet a fellow Irishman and to have him on the program. Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. Thank you. Keeping busy. Everything's good.
Let's talk about it. Let's get right into it. Let's talk about your book, the Red Pandemic. Let's just start with that phrase of the book first. It's the Global Marxist Cult. And what when you talk about defining Red Pandemic in your mind, what is it?
So basically, I chose the word red because it's just the symbol, or traditionally the color of what people call communism. And then pandemic is, I was trying to link it in with COVID and to show that we had a more serious pandemic, or we have a more serious pandemic of crazy revolutionary behavior, and that it's coming from Marxism. So a little bit sensationalist, but it makes perfect sense. That's the first part of the title anyway. And then the rest of it then is obviously drawing attention to Marxism and the fact that it is indeed a cult movement. So we're dealing with fanatics, basically. We're trying to build some sort of new world.
And this is so the global phenomenon is one thing. We'll get to that. In America, before I met you, if someone were to say to me, the global Marxist cult, I have said, at least for 4 years on this program, that what we see in our Democrat Party, and just for your sake, I don't really refer to them as Democrats. They have blended communism, socialism, Marxism, fascism. They've blended all of the isms together. And the Democrat Party of John F. Kennedy, I mean, for goodness sakes, the Democratic Party of Bill Clinton, in my opinion, doesn't exist anymore. It's this communist-socialist movement that has put forth several items within their agenda. And just to summarize a couple of them, again, in my opinion, immorality, a complete devaluation of morality, of basic, what we call here in America, traditional American values, which really I think can be defined as just Judeo-Christian values. And they absolutely are going to war with those values to fundamentally transform America away from that. Is that what you're seeing in Ireland and other countries around the world as well, Emmet?
Oh, absolutely. What you described, this kind of degeneration of the West, is a global issue, and that's what's helped me to wake up to what's happening. Is that I noticed the patterns, mass immigration, the things that affect us, radical sex ed, the climate change movement, the control of free speech, you name it, the trans movement, all of it, the attack on Christianity, the same pattern all across the West, all in a coordinated fashion. And of course, this didn't all just fall from the sky. This is quite old. And, it's really created this situation now where we're all kind of in this kind of struggle.
I saw a clip, and I'm not going to know the details, the gentleman's name. This was a clip that was taken on the grounds of an Irish university over in Ireland. And there was a professor being arrested, literally being arrested because he dared to speak out against the liberal agenda. I think it was the transgender movement specifically that he was refusing to engage and refusing to advocate that children would, for example, benefit from this transgender ideology and the policies and the platforms and the politics that surround all of that. They literally put him in a paddy wagon and took him away. And we see this in Europe. We've seen lots of stories from the UK, Britain, England, when doing the same thing, posting on social media a certain opinion, whether it be in the form of a meme or a video or whatever, being actually literally physically arrested. Is this part of the Marxist cult?
Yes, so what you described there is pretty much, as we've seen, to state the obvious. First of all, there's a massive double standard being created, where if you want to get out in the streets and be part of a trans march, or you want to be anti-capitalist, or you want to march for Palestinian rights, you'll be just fine because they're all in line with Marxism. But if you go and criticize the ideology or contradict it in any way, you better watch out. All of a sudden you don't have rights. The humanitarianism they love to champion doesn't apply to you the minute you contradict their narrative. And the gentleman you described is Enoch Burke. He's a teacher in Ireland who he's part of a religious family who are staunch Christians, and they love to get involved with activism, and they're great characters. And he basically didn't want to go along with the whole gender labeling, fiasco. And then he turned up against court order, and it turned into a big fiasco. Now he's been kind of in prison for quite a while, and he's a lot of protests because of it. So we can clearly see that totalitarianism is coming in now, and they've been trying to hide it as best they can. But of course, the more and more people complain, the more the state it can't hide it as well as it used to. And now it's getting a little bit obvious that this is very one-sided. The minute you go against this globalist internationalist monster, you don't have rights anymore. Ironically, they try to make you a second-class citizen. And I thought this movement was supposed to be against the class system, but apparently not.
Emmet, if you were sitting down to a table with a group of people who were not awake to the radicalization that in America we call the Democrat Party, who are not aware of the red pandemic, the Global Marxist Cult, the title of your book. If you were sitting down to a table with people who were totally unaware, how do you begin to explain to them and set up the truth about how this has taken place, how we got here? And let me just juxtapose that, because in America, I think many Americans look at 2020, the theft of an American presidential election and a pandemic were beset upon us. And for whatever reason, they believe that this catastrophe that we're in right now with the radical left Marxist cult movement was sprung upon us in 2020, when in fact, in my view, at least 126 years, this has been in the making. So how would you begin to wake people up if you had a chance to sit down and speak with them about this?
Well, I suppose, as you say there, it's very old, and it's been very good. This ideology has been very good at repackaging itself. And how I would start is I would talk to an average everyday person, and you would talk to them about mass immigration. Say, do you think it's okay for Irish people to be a minority in their own country, or to lead that way? How do you feel about radical sex ed? Do you think it's okay to teach that to kids? And when you if they're reasonable and they're not brainwashed, they will agree with you across the board on all these things. And then what I would do is make the link to Marxism, because they're all based on the class struggle principle anyway, which was contained in the Communist Manifesto. It used to be about the rich against the poor, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. But in the 20th century, the ideology mutated into different forms. So now, the migrants are the oppressed class. Us Westerners are obviously the oppressors. And feminism, same thing. Men are the oppressors, females are the oppressed. And socialism, rich and the poor. The trans ideology, same thing. It's all based on the idea that someone's being oppressed and they need to be saved. I mean, even the climate change movement is quite an amusing example, because the planet's oppressed, and we humans, us polluters, especially us capitalist polluters, are the oppressors. So it's the same formula wheeled out again and again. And I like to get that message across to people. All of the things they've been passionate about across the West in the last few decades are essentially coming from the one ideology. So my reasoning is, let's suppress the ideology and we'll start to see all these movements become derailed, because there's no fanaticism driving them anymore.
How do Marxists with this agenda get their foothold, Emmet? If we were to warn parents, for example, or anyone, how do they begin to get a foothold? How do they begin to sway what appears to be a lot of people? How do they do it?
Well, what's interesting, Doug, is that this thing is so old and it's become so sophisticated. I mean, say in the 1920s, for example, the Bolshevik Revolution was 1917. In 1919, under the orders of Lenin, they created the Third Communist International. So it's the third internationalist communist organization. And this is a key organization I mentioned in the book. And I actually listed every single communist group from since forever, in every single country, in every single continent. It took me a few months to put the tables together, but that was a key period, because even back then they were trying to get into the labor union movements, into education, getting involved in business, getting involved in politics. And even around that period as well, there was an Italian Marxist by the name of Antonio Gramsci. He was a big proponent of the idea of what they called the long march through the institutions, rather than having a violent overthrow with the pitchforks and so on, the torches. This was about injecting Marxist thought into the culture to slowly turn it Marxist. So they've been at this quite a long time. They're very, very good at it, and that's what you guys are dealing with in the States. As you mentioned, the Democratic Party are clearly Marxist. They're compromised all the way through. They represent the treasonous side, and the Republican side represents the patriotic side. And they've managed to get in because they understand that this is an ideological war. And they've had to hide their intentions. So controlling the education system, the media, the non-profit complex, you name it, it's all part of the game.
Emmet, we're almost up against a break. You have time to stay with me for the rest of the half hour here today?
Oh, yes, sir. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today, Emmet Connor, the author of the book, the must-read book, Red Pandemic, the Global Marxist Cult. Emmet, welcome back. Good to have you here.
Thank you, Doug. Great to be here.
Okay, obviously, as if your accent didn't give it away, you're from Ireland. You're in your homeland. You're back home. You get the idea for this book. What was the reason behind the idea for the book? Why the motivation to say this about what the Marxist cult really is?
Well, basically, it was around the time of about 2019, around that period, and I noticed the things I was describing, mass immigration, radical sex ed, climate change, all these things were hitting Ireland, like in all the other Western countries. And even the climate change movement, Ireland is a very, very small country. It pumps out very little CO2, yet we were supposed to, change how we do things. It seemed to be quite bizarre. And obviously I knew about communism for many years, so I started to join the dots. Also, there was a COVID situation, which had the fingerprints of international communism all over it, and also the BLM events in the US as well. Those things came together, and I kind of looked around at, I could see the connections, but I looked around at public discourse in Ireland at first, and I realized no one was talking about the connection here with international Marxism. So I started to look at discourse a little bit more, realized hardly anybody was talking about this at all, and I kind of did more investigation and thought I really have to do something about this to raise awareness, because people were not joining the dots. And obviously one of the biggest consequences of Marxism infecting a country is the breakdown of sovereignty and this kind of fear of people being patriotic almost. So it was starting to cause real problems, and that's what kind of started me off and put the book together.
Does Ireland have an immigration problem, a border problem like such as the United States, in any kind of similar form or fashion? Is there an immigration problem in Ireland?
Oh, massively so. And Ireland is actually in a more serious position than the States, because you guys have a lot more land and a bigger population. You're pushing almost 340 million. Ireland is like almost 7 million for the whole island, including the north, or slightly over. And obviously we're starting to see the changes much quicker. In fact, there was a massive acceleration of mass immigration about, let's say, I'm not sure the time frame, maybe 5 to 10 years ago. There was a massive increase. It was almost like somebody hit the accelerator pad, and they wanted Ireland to fill up faster. And we are at the edge of Europe, obviously, or we've got, the UK between us and the mainland, but they're coming in by plane mostly, and really making a big difference, causing a lot of problems, causing, breakdown in the services, a breakdown of law and order, racial tensions. And you've even got the state is now getting more heavy-handed and shoving migrants into migrant sites, old factories, even hotels and touristy accommodation, you name it. And when the Irish try to protest, now things are getting a bit more nasty. We're starting to see the state getting very heavy-handed and using public order units or riot squads to suppress the people. Things are getting really, really bad.
Certainly sounds familiar. So we see those things happen here as well. And let's talk about the book specifically. First of all, let's make sure we get this out there. Where can people find the book? Where can they buy the book?
Sure. So for Americans and Canadians, I suppose Amazon is a good place to go. First of all, nice and convenient. But if they go to my website, resolvingor.com, so R for Romeo, resolvingor.com, there's a page on the website dedicated to the book. It's got a basic overview with the images, etc., and also where people can buy. So it's on Barnes and Noble and some other outlets as well.
Excellent. All right. ResolvingR.com, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you head over there. Check it out. Amazon.com as well. The book is Red Pandemic, the Global Marxist Cult. You can't miss it, right? Red cover. It's got all, you can't miss it. Emmet, in my view, okay, so I talk about in America, I call them the Communist Socialist Party, formerly known as Democrat Party. And I caution Americans about anyone who says or states that America needs to be, quote unquote, fundamentally transformed. President Obama was the first American president to say that out loud, and it caused a lot of eyebrows to be raised back then. And even more so now in hindsight, I look back at that statement, and it's no doubt that's what they're trying to do. Now, this movement, this communist socialist movement, is in full, like you said, pedal to the metal, full force, full speed ahead. They have accelerated. They're no longer secretive. They're no longer hiding what they really believe. They want to fundamentally transform America, and they do it by attacking key pillars within this country. First and foremost, I think the traditional family unit. And this began years ago. It's nothing new. I mean, when you look at the liberal trends and their agenda, if we can attack the family, if we can convince women that they don't need men, and if we can then begin to project this, as I call it, the wussification of men, the wussification of the American man, if we can begin to do this, then the LGBTQ kook, as I say, movement begins to settle in and becomes more easily accessible. And then second, I think their agenda is one thing. Their policies, their platform, their politics, that's one thing. They do what they do. In America, we're in a presidential election season, as you know. I believe that the radical left movement in America's number one goal is not the presidency of the United States. I believe that the radical liberal movement in America, their number one goal is to move the needle further to the left. That's number one. Now, they'll take the presidency if they can get it. Absolutely. It's not like they're going to turn it down. But their number one goal is, in my opinion, to move the needle further to the left. And that includes every topic that we're talking about. I mean, imagine 10 years ago talking about this fiction of gender misappropriation and the mutilation of children's genitalia as a pathway to happiness if they believe in that fiction. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. And that's what they want to achieve. The further left they can get us, the better. That's their goal. Do you get a sense that that might be right?
Oh, spot on. There's no sign that there's a limit to how crazy they're going to push things. And looking at the history of the ideology, there's always another more extreme wave coming on the back of the last one. And usually, and we're seeing this a lot now, the new wave tends to wipe out the old wave, and they may even have infighting and so on. But yeah, everything you describe is all connected. And I agree that where they're pushing America, they're pushing that Overton window so much to the left that people have forgotten now. Being far right, like they say in Ireland, means you just got more traditionalist values. You're from the pit of hell if you're a traditionalist, because they've got it. What they've done is, linking into what you've said, they've got a monopoly on virtue. They've managed to convince people that the difference between right and wrong is the Marxist interpretation of what right and wrong is, and all of the chaos you're describing, the degeneracy and so on. This, I often say, this is really Satanism repackaged. It's against everything that's natural and part of creation, and there's no limit to how bad they're going to push things, basically.
And I continually believe that what they do, this chaos that we see in America, the chaos that you see in Ireland, is obviously purposeful, not a doubt. Evidence of the obvious is sufficient. We can see this. In America, with the border, dilute the American identity, grow the radical liberal electoral base, give them voting privileges, make them citizens without following the law, all of it to create crisis and chaos, because they believe in the long run, if they can convince people, if they can surround people with crisis and chaos, then they can convince people that the fastest way to remedy that is through big government, the state, right?
Yeah, they have a big history of doing that, and that's why, as you say, they're diametrically opposed to anything that stands in the way. So they'll obviously go after any sort of notions of free market, the concepts of liberalism or classical liberalism, the idea of having a right to do things like the right to own property or right to vote or have your religious beliefs. All that must be swept away to build the new utopia. And the reason why they want to bring everything under the control of a centralized government is because, Marx et al. And Vladimir Lenin believe that the people, quote unquote, should be in charge, but really what you end up with is a bunch of Marxist nutcases in charge, and there's no more freedom. So the only freedom that's left, as I describe in the book, the only kind of freedom you're allowed is freedom to be Marxist. Everything else needs to be annihilated because it gets in the way of utopia. So, and to add on to what you're saying, a big mistake people make, Doug, is, as you well know, they try to reason with these people. And we've been watching this for years. They try to debate with them and convince them of things. But you can't reason with crazy, and you can't reason with fundamentalist ideologues. And they're looking down on us. They know what's best for humanity, and they're going to drag us towards utopia. And any sort of death or destruction or sexual assault or murder or economic collapse or hardship, all of that's going to be worth it, because utopia it's just within reach. We just have to experiment with communism a little bit more, and we'll get there.
Emmet, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Ladies and gentlemen, the book, Red Pandemic, The Global Marxist Cult. You want to check it out. Emmet's website, resolvingr.com, resolvingr.com. You can get the book over there, Amazon, Barnes & Noble as well, but check out his website. Emmet, one of these days, I would hope that, and I've invited you, and you're going to think about coming to my conference in Branson, Missouri in December. Ladies and gentlemen, that's determinedpatriotismconference.com. If he decides that he likes me well enough to say yes, he may well be down there. You may get to meet him in person. And Emmet, when that happens, I'd love to have a pint of Guinness with you.
No problem. We'll make sure we'll celebrate the day for sure.
Yeah, hopefully by December 13th and 14th, we'll be celebrating a Trump victory here in the States. How long will you be with us in the colonies, as we say?
I'm not really sure what the plan is, Doug. I kind of come over here taking a leap of faith, trying to spread the gospel here of anti-Marxism. So we'll see what happens, and I'm open, but I'll definitely be here in December for sure.
Okay, wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, again, Emmet Connor, the website, resolvingr.com. Check it out. Emmet, God bless you. Thank you very much for being on the program. We appreciate you, and good luck with the book. Good luck with your time here in the United States.
Thank you, Doug. It's an honor. Thank you.
You bet. Ladies and gentlemen, that does it for me. Thank you very much for joining us. We are in this together, standing shoulder to shoulder as we try to reclaim the Republic from the grip of the Commie Socialist, formerly known as Democrat Party. Remember, DougBillings.us. Head over there if you would. Consider a recurring monthly donation at DougBillings.us. And until tomorrow, take care of one another, ladies and gentlemen. Believe it. For the Republic. Cheers.